Hey, it's Andy Yanez, and welcome to another episode of Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian family. As always, we are off the heels of another Houston Cougars men's basketball game. This time, number 3 Houston came out victorious inside of the Fertitta Center for their final game of their non-conference schedule for the 2022-23 regular season, and that was against McNeese, a really lopsided affair in which the Cougars came out victorious 83 to 44 over the Cowboys. And like I said, they finished 12-1 in their non-conference portion of the schedule. Joining me as always, Dayon Dunlap. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well. Dominant win as expected, but I'm doing well. How about you?
I am doing well. If you watched the other episode of Let's Rage Koozie, you noticed that we are missing a key figure in our panel, and that is Chris Gardner of the Houston Raw Ball Review, who is still gracious enough to allow us to use his platform here on the Houston Raw Ball Review YouTube channel, but is out covering the Houston Rockets, and that is why he is not with us today after this game. But I guess we'll do this a little bit different because in this game, I think there was a couple big stories. I think the biggest one, at least the most eye-popping one, came from Emmanuel Sharp, who he had set career highs by the time the team had gone into halftime. He had hit 5 3-pointers for 15 points. Both of those were career highs. He had tied his career high in rebounds, which I mean, it's not as I
Mhm.
probably it was 3 rebounds, but he had managed to match that all in the first half. So he had an incredible first half performance for the Cougars. He ended up hitting one more 3-pointer in the second half to finish with 18 points. So let's start with Sharp. I think that's something that over the course of the past 3 games, you've kind of seen the confidence much more from the coaching staff, in particular with Kelvin Sampson, because he's been that first guard right out of the bench for Houston. And today in a game against McNeese, he showed out and really from an offensive standpoint what the Cougars could need, especially from a shooting standpoint.
Right. And that first man coming off the bench is very vital to this team. And Coach Sampson, over the last couple of weeks, have had Emmanuel coming off the bench being that first key piece. And one thing he talked about just a couple of days ago was him just being consistent in practice, making shots. That's another thing. We talk about how important it is defensively and do all those culture things. And also to his credit, his career high in rebounds, he had 2 offensive rebounds. And so, but man, he's I think what I said a couple weeks ago, he brings confidence shooting the basketball. And I think he can bring consistency as far as his shot making. It won't always fall, but the way the defense will guard him will be differently and it can open up the floor for different things. But I think what he brings is another scorer. Tonight he looked prolific as far as when the shots was falling. I think he's going to be a rhythm scorer, a rhythm shooter as well. But tonight he really had it going. He was lighting it up. And he looked comfortable out there. I think his time last year sitting on the floor, seeing that Elite Eight run, going through practices, rehab, and because you think about it, he hasn't played in 2 years. So I think he's still finding his rhythm and putting all the experience that he's had up until this point. And now he's beginning to flourish. Well, he's began to flourish here with his career night tonight. But I think he has a lot of game, particularly offensively.
Absolutely, and that's something that he mentioned post game during his availability with reporters after the game against the Cowboys, and he said that really that extra 6 months that it bought him, he was able to be around the program. He was able to rehab with the Houston Cougars, and then in particular being able to really help them during their March Madness run last year, and be around the program, and just again be able to kind of see firsthand what the expectations are from a cultural standpoint, because that's something you're looking at it with Jarris Walker and Terrence Arsenal. They're true freshmen that coming in that it's been a bit of an adjustment period now. It still hasn't been, smooth sailing for Manuel Sharp, but that you kind of start to see where he's kind of elevated from the other two freshmen, at least from that standpoint. Now, one other player that I did want to mention that he had a career high in points too, and that's Javier Francis, who had 23 points, 13 rebounds. This is his third career double double. And honestly, throughout the course of the game, I don't know if you could say this when he had 23 points and 13 rebounds, but it was a bit of a quiet down the stretch. You just look up at the scoreboard, and he had been able to accumulate all those points and rebounds. And when you look at it, I think one of the Sampson always talks about from younger players, in particular freshmen, but it comes with consistency. And now he's put together back-to-back home games where he's played well, and he's just continued to build on it. Against North Carolina A&T, he had 17 points and 15 rebounds, which at that point, from a point standpoint, that was his career high then, and still pretty much almost getting really close to being able to match the rebounding output. He didn't play that much against Virginia, but again, that's what Kelvin Sampson, the coaching staff, are looking for in a lot of these younger players, being able to stack up performances like that when they're given that opportunity.
Right, and I think with extended minutes, he really just showed what he can do against a opponent who really doesn't have much size or anyone near athletic as he is, especially with his length and athletic ability. And so, man, he looked really well tonight. But I think, just like you said, that 23 was quiet. But one thing that wasn't quiet was his activity. He was going after every single rebound, his intensity, the way he showed out on different screens. I think he played a really well around the game, and you just can see like the investment that they put in him, and each time that he plays, it's just like for Emmanuel. I mean, that experience is only going to be to their benefit. They're only going to get better and better and better. But Emmanuel, like I've been saying, I mean, what he brings to this team, no one else brings. As far as with his length, his ability to not only block shots but change a lot of shots, and also he's a bigger body. I think that as well, as far and also with his ability to catch alley oops. Seen his finesse. He's not just a dunker. He has some skill as well. He's very well skilled in the post, and so two big games from two young players.
The comment from King Jaja, Sharp wants his 2K sniper badge, and I mean, with a performance like this,
Yeah.
he only shot three. He shot 10 shots. All of them were 3 pointers. He went 6 of 10 for the night. He did have a bit of an injury scare towards the middle of the second half, where I guess from our perspective, it kind of looked like he was cramping up because he was limping a little bit. The head athletic trainer John Houston came up and was looking at him. He gave him water. He was drinking water. It looked like, I don't know if he went all the way into the locker room. He went into the tunnel, but he came back out. He's on the bench, and then he played once again later in the game. So obviously, from that aspect, hopefully it's not anything that's anything considered serious, and he was able to come back and play again. What are you gonna say?
One thing I want to add for Emmanuel, Coach Sampson mentioned during availability during the week that Emmanuel at his high school team, he was the lead dog. Like he was the best player on
Yeah,
the team, the alpha
he was
male.
an exactly.
And you can tell that on the court with the supreme confidence that he has. He still kind of defers to like as far as the senior the and the moments in the team, but when he gets his shot, he doesn't hesitate. You can still see he has that dog in him as far as being ready for the moment, being ready to let it go, being aggressive, looking for a shot, and not settling or passing up certain different shots. And I think that aggressiveness is what got jumped him up on a depth chart as far as getting that more playing time in front of Terrence and Ramon. I think both bring different elements, but what this team I think is needed off the bench is someone else who's a threat to score. Not only that, score from deep to spread the floor. And so, because I think you're gonna need Jamal and Marcus and Tremont to be able to penetrate in different games in the tournament when the game kind of slows down.
And I'd like to remind everybody that may be watching live and or listening to the audio only version wherever you get Pod Slam and Jamma, that this is Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian family, the unofficial Houston postgame show for men's basketball and football. We'll be back on Friday for the final football postgame show of the year when Houston takes on Louisiana in the Independence Bowl. Houston Cougars football teams made a lot of noise this week, the past 2 days, when it comes to recruiting. So hopefully they can continue to build on momentum in the first year in the Big 12 in 2023. So exciting times overall for the University of Houston. But in regards to this episode specifically, the Saxenian family, they're the primary sponsor for the show throughout the remainder of the regular season and into the American Athletic Conference tournament. But of course, we also have our other sponsors, beginning with Hoop and Holler, the Houston Cougars Micro Collective. They are the entity behind those SAC-AV commercials. If you did start with us when it comes to Let's Rage Cougs back in the football season with the Anthony Jones, Big Hawk, those commercials are promoting Star Pizza. heard from a source close that they're really close to dropping another commercial, this time involving members on the men's basketball team. So certainly keep an eye out for that. But overall, they will be promoting Star Pizza, who's another sponsor for today's episode of Let's Rage Coogs, with various locations across the Houston area. Star Pizza, Houston's best pizza since 1976. And if you ever want to order online or just check out their menu, be sure to check out starpizza.net. And also, well, last in this aspect but not least, a big shout out to HOUNIL. HOUNIL.com is a subscription based name, image, and likeness model that benefits both Cougar student athletes and fans. HOUNIL helps Houston athletes benefit from the new NIL rules. Athletes create original content in their own words, giving subscribers insight into their lives on and off the court. What the players need is for you to subscribe. Plans start at just $20, and that money goes to athlete subscribers will get one-of-a-kind content straight from the players while helping the Houston Cougars compete on the national stage. Subscribe at HOUNIL.com. And as always, go Cougs. Once again, that's HOUNIL. And a big shout out to Ryan Monceau, the owner of GoCougs.com, and also HOUNIL for helping be a partner here on Let's Rage Cougs. But on that note, we'll toss it over to head coach Kelvin Sampson. Here's what he had to say post-game after Houston's 83-44 victory over McNeese.
Well, it's wisdoms and lessons. That's I think that was born out of the Kent State game, St. Mary's game, Alabama game. We tried to give our guys freedom. It's not about running plays. We don't need to run a lot of plays. Teams that look like us aren't going to live off a play. We like our kids to make plays in space. We're set up that way. There's a method to our madness. But what we're doing now is making the right play. Against Alabama, we're shooting hard shots. We get in the paint, draw somebody, and we weren't moving it the way we should. But we had a little come to Jesus meeting about how we're going to play. There's some things just aren't negotiable. Ball's got to move it. And if you catch somebody in a closeout, you think you can drive it, then drive it, draw somebody, and then move it again. But quick, decisive ball movement has been good. Last, I think we had 17 assists and 25 on 25 baskets Saturday against Virginia. Tonight it was, what did we play before? A&T. I think that was another heavy assist night. But hey, our kids want to win. And sometimes as a coach, you have to plug the GPS in for them, and then they just follow the directions. But our defense and our rebounding, but our young guys are getting better too. Terrence was getting comfortable. Emmanuel, JVA, Ramon, Reggie and Lauren. They both had high temperatures. Sick. Neither one could answer a bell tonight, but hopefully we'll get them both healthier pretty soon. But every minute that JVA gets is just an investment for our program and for him. Same thing with Emmanuel. We've got good young players, but they're playing on a veteran team. Our minutes aren't always going to be what they were tonight, but they understand that. I thought the team that started the game tonight, the team starts off zoning you. Right away, you're going to make multiple passes in multiple possessions. So it's not like you can play fast versus zone. We're not going to put down and just shoot it right away, and we're going to take a good shot. But I thought our ball movement and our decision making tonight was really good. And obviously, I never take offensive rebounding for granted, but that's I think we're number one in the nation right now in offensive rebounding, and our defense just continues to improve. Although, for a large part, they made some shots there at the end when we went zone, but start the game and start second half. I think they had 19 at halftime, and third until about 2 minutes to go, I think they had about 16 in the second half. So they made those threes there at the end. So just a good night. Look around the country and see all the teams getting beat. We're getting beat by teams just like McNeese State. Everybody just pushes that to the side. Connor Edwards, Tajay Moore, Fabian White, and Josh Carlton. Those we had to ride all those horses last year. Marcus didn't play last year from December on. Tremont didn't. This kid didn't play basketball for 18 months. Broke his leg. Broke his tibia. Compound fracture of his ankle. Didn't do anything. JVA barely played at all last year. So we're integrating so many new guys into what we're doing. But our veterans, when I say veterans, J1's got 2 more years left. Tremont's got 3 more years. We've got a lot of guys that are just scratching their surface in some areas.
So once again, that was Houston Cougars head coach Kelvin Sampson talking post game. I think there was a lot of interesting stuff that he said from that soundbite. First, and the one that we really want to shout out to Lauren Sampson and Reggie Chain. Hopefully they're feeling better with the illness that they had been dealing with that kept them from even being able to attend this game inside the Fertitta Center. But in particular, when it comes to the assist, something that he talked about against Alabama, it was clear. And I can't remember when Kelvin said it, if it was a post-game availability after. It might have been after the North Carolina A&T game. But he was not happy with how the Cougars shared the ball in that Alabama game. He said that really they were selfish during a lot of stretches in that game, and it's something that he mentioned against North Carolina A&T, against Virginia, and now against McNeese. They've been able to put together strong performances when it comes to the ball movement, making the right plays. And then you heard it in that clip, it's something that's a non-negotiable for them. And once again, in this game against the Cowboys, Houston made 32 field goals. 23 of those 32 made shots came off of assist. And that's kind of the recipe that Kelvin Sampson wants to see his team thrive in that aspect, being able to share the ball and be able to make the right basketball play.
Right, and they do that, but one thing they do well is riding the hot hand. Regardless of who it is on any given night, the ball movement is mandatory like it is. And from what I've seen tonight, the ball movement, the decisive ball movement and passes really stuck out to me tonight. And what that tells me is the chemistry is getting better. And one thing this team does, and Coach Sampson just talking about, like his team, he gives his guards and his team freedom to hoop. It's not always run a play, like run it. If you get out of transition, move out of transition, penetrate and kick. You can play against the zone, get inside the zone, move the ball around, penetrate, drive and kick, give up another pass, swing it to get good shots. But and that's what his team really does. They would do a great job with that. But they do a great job of riding the hot hand. Like if Jairus and everyone is pretty much has the freedom to get their shots that they can make on any given night. If your night is going, you make a couple, 2 or 3, the ball will find you no matter who it is. And that's a credit to the culture and the offensive mindset to feed the hot hand. And that was Emmanuel. I see a couple comments. They asked, do we think if Francis, JVA can start in front of Roberts? And I think we kind of talked about that. I'm not sure. I think it could be a possibility. I wouldn't rule it out because I like the J1 with Reggie coming off the bench and his role as far as being an energy plug and bringing everything he brings along with the offensive, which he showed he's been working on and has been providing sometime this season.
I think that's an interesting question. Like you said, we talked about it after the North Carolina A&T game because that's when he put together the 17-point 15 rebound double, which at that point was the second of his career. Now he has 3. I think it'll make things a lot more interesting if he can continue, again, something that Calvin Sampson talks about, consistency with younger players. Can they continue to in Francis's case, can he continue to kind of force the hand of the coaching staff, in particular Kelvin? Like you said, he's going to go to the hot hand. And if every time Francis gets the opportunity to play, he's able to get a double in those eye-popping manner ways, I think he's certainly going to be able to force the hand of the Houston Cougars coaching staff today. I think he played more minutes than Jawan Roberts. He played let me get the correct number right in front of me, but yeah, he played 26 minutes, so he tied with Jawan Roberts. They each played 26 minutes, and you round it up. But I think in that aspect, and again, you do got to take into account that this was against McNeese, and I
Yeah.
think just from again that perspective of he's still a younger player, I think you saw that against Virginia, and it's something that after the game. They only went 8 deep against the Cavaliers, and he went, at least as of right now, early on from a standpoint, because there's certainly that much more trust in Jawan Roberts just because of what he has been able to be a show to the program. So I think it's something that could come later into as the season progresses, but I wouldn't count on it, if that makes sense. I'm curious to see what you think about that.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you say, but I also think it's a difference between starting and finishing the game. That's why I can see the possibility of it, but I agree with everything you said. So, but I do think he has to earn Coach Sampson trust to finish games. I think that's why I wouldn't put it off from him
Yeah.
starting, but it really doesn't really matter. What matters is who is going to finish the game, and I think it's going to take maybe a game where Reggie or J1 or whomever is in foul trouble for him to have that big moment in the game. Because when you look at the tight games that we played against big competition, Alabama and Virginia, Coach had a very tight rotation. When it comes to tournament time against really good teams, Coach's rotation normally gets short. Let's get into blowouts when he widens his rotation somewhere. So I think
Hmm.
um, he can have that possibility, but he just has to keep showing, and particularly when his time comes, just keep shining. But I agree with everything you said.
No, absolutely. But in regards to the game overall, in particular how it went, kind of one of the other players that we haven't really touched on and would do so on the other side of this break is Marcus Sasser. So kind of teasing in that aspect. But once again, that those of you that are watching live, thank you for being interactive in the comment section on the Houston Roundball Review YouTube channel. This is Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian family. The Saxenian family will be the primary sponsor for Let's Rage Coogs for the remainder of the basketball regular season and into the American Athletic Conference postseason tournament. That's Rage Coogs, the unofficial Houston postgame show for men's basketball and football. And we also need to shout out our other partners, starting with HOUNIL. HOUNIL. As the Cougars move to the Big 12, Houston will be competing with national players in basketball like Kansas, Baylor, Texas Tech, and a lot more. These schools, they have fans that have built huge name, image, and likeness groups to get their athletes NIL compensation. That gives them a huge advantage over the University of Houston, where NIL is still in its infancy. But you can keep Cougar athletes, or you can help Cougar athletes by getting involved. Go to HOUNIL.com to subscribe to player created content like essays, video podcasts, and get access to private events with University of Houston players. Players are compensated for creating content, and fans get an inside look at their lives. Plans start at just $20 a month, and that money helps the Cougars retain players to stay atop in basketball and build momentum in football. HOUNIL.com. Subscribers get one of a kind content straight from Cougar athletes. Subscribe today at HOUNIL.com. And as always, go Cougs. And we touched on it, the excitement just overall from the university standpoint as they transition to the Big 12. It is going to be huge, especially from a basketball standpoint. We know how much of a powerhouse that conference will be once Houston joins. I mean, it already is a powerhouse. Now add Houston to the mix, and it's going to be, every game's going to be what's what Kellen Sampson says, all road games are street fights. Well, every conference game next year is going to be a street fight for the Cougars. So be sure to help out the Houston Cougars athletes in any way you can. Just starting $20, and they are creating some pretty cool content in regards to their own content that really the players want to drive and they want to create for themselves to get their perspective. But back onto the show here on Let's Reach Cougs, I teased it. Marcus Sasser, who since the going back, I want to say it was the Alabama game when he obviously the Alabama game that the whole team had the struggles down the stretch. But since then, he's been a lot more consistent with his offensive just jumper overall. And again, in this game, he shot the ball 6 for 12, so he finished the night 50% from the field, and kind of he was exactly 50% because he's 50% overall from the field, but he was also 50% from threes. He was 5 of 10 on 3-pointers. I think that's an interesting note that Kelvin said post game. You couldn't hear it on that clip, but I think one of the big reasons why the Cougars saw success that they did from the 3-point line today against McNeese was because of who shot most of the threes. It was Marcus Sasser and Emmanuel Sharp. And he said it. He gave the example of when he was an assistant coach with the Rockets. The Rockets would be called a good free throw team when James Harden shot a lot of the free throws, and they would be called a terrible free throw shooting team when Dwight Howard shot a lot of free throws. And it's kind of the sense in regards to McNeese, where both of those guards, Sasser and Sharp, got a lot of the 3-pointers. I mean, combined, they hit 11 of Houston's 14 3-pointers. So that's certainly a big boost. But in regards to Sasser specifically, I think overall, I don't know if you could call it juice the right phrase to say it, but he just looked like he was running up and down the court a lot more. And he got a lot of those. He's something that he does really well is being able to catch and shoot in transition and find those threes. It's something that he's done really well in. It's something he did a couple times tonight against McNeese.
Yeah, he does a great job of getting his feet planted and using his upper body to knock down those transition threes. He does a great job of doing that. It seems like him and Jamal chemistry in transition is stellar. And also, he has really, really excelled and became a really good, incredible fast break player, like the comment says there. And his ability to handle the ball and finish with the left or the right. One time in transition, he took it behind his back with his left hand and finished with the left hand. But Marcus, man, early on, he was just in a slump. I mean, that's really just what it was. He was getting the same shots that he's making now. They just weren't falling. I think after the Alabama game where he had the goggles and he didn't play as well, I'm sure, as he wanted to play, I'm sure he put in even more work. And over these last 2 games, he's really, really had his shot falling, and he looks more comfortable. It looks like the Marcus that we used to seeing. But it is a constant development from not just being a 3-point shooter like he was early in his career. Now he can get it off the dribble. He can create. He's taking 2-point jumpers. And so Marcus is coming around as far as now he's consistently making the shots that he normally makes. He's always gets looks, and is a threat offensively.
One of the other players just kind of sticking in that backcourt, Jamal Shed. Again, he didn't necessarily have a lot of points in regards to from that offensive standpoint, but once again, he had 9 assists and 3 turnovers. I'm sure that's a 3-to-1 ratio. That's a ratio where you'll live with a 3-to-1 ratio from a turnover assist aspect. But I think in a game like tonight, it just seemed, going back to that ball movement with Jamal Shed, and overall the team in general did a good job of being able to make the right basketball play and set up their teammates for open shots, which in any given night, it doesn't matter who the opponent did tonight. It was against McNeese, but whenever you're set up your teammates, it's certainly going to make it much more probable that you're going to find success offensively. What did you see from Jamal Shed in this game against the Cowboys?
He has a great eye for getting players the ball in their spots with accurate passes to right in their shooting pockets. That really makes him an exceptional point guard. And watching this game, it makes me think about how in Alabama he pretty much carried us scoring, but he's naturally and is a pass first point guard. But when his scores has it going, then he'll take the back seat and feed them like he normally wants to do. But just kind of proves to how great of a basketball player he is right now collegiately, and how he can be when he gets to the next level as he continues to develop and his jumper gets more automatic, that when his team needs him to score, he can do that. But his playmaking has been stellar. But we also got to give Tremont his flowers with his playmaking. He made a lot of great passes. He was second on the team in assists tonight with 5 assists. And his playmaking ability really, really stands out. The way he sees the floor, the way he can break a defense down and draw in. I think the team really needs that, particularly in the half-court set. Because like Coach Sampson said, they don't always draw up a play. It's sometimes a player needs to get the ball, be able to break down the defense, create a mismatch, draw the defense in, and dish it out, and just make a play, just hoop. And Tremont, he's great at that. He made a lot of plays off the dribble tonight and made a lot of extra passes, gave up a great shot for his teammates. So make sure we give Tremont his flowers tonight as well.
That's something that Kelvin Sampson in the past, he's mentioned how that's kind of the next step for Mark in regards to being able to develop as an overall basketball player, not just a scorer. I think in a game tonight against McNeese, that's certainly a great point where he was second on the team in assists. And in regards to overall throughout the season, I think it's something that's kind of gone under the radar. But you look at the stat sheets, and he'll get up to 4 assists, he'll get to 5 assists consistently throughout the season. That's going to be something that's going to be pivotal. It adds an extra layer to Houston's offense going forward. But once again, I do like to remind everybody that are watching and are listening to Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian family. If you're listening to the audio only versions, whenever you may be listening to Let's Rage Coogs, I do obviously we do want to give a shout out to you guys because even though you're not watching live, you are supporting Let's Rage Coogs. So be sure to hit us up on social media at Potslimajama or our personal Twitter accounts at Yanez_5 at Dayon Dunlap. And we want to hear from you guys as well. You guys are part of the conversation. What are your thoughts about Houston's 83-44 victory over McNeese? And of course, we like to give a shout out to our partners, beginning with Hoop and Holler, the Houston Cougars Micro Collective, the entity behind those star pizza commercials with SACAF stars like the Anthony Jones and Big Hawk from the Houston Cougars football team. Star Pizza is our other sponsor, or one of our other sponsors, for today's episode of Let's Reach Cougs, with multiple locations across the Houston area. A good pizza is just a phone call and or just a couple clicks away now that everything's done online. Be sure to order online if you're interested. Starpizza.net. Star Pizza, Houston's best pizza since 1976. And also a big shout out to HOUNIL. HOUNIL.com is a subscription based name, image, and likeness model that benefits both Cougar athletes and fans. HOUNIL helps Houston student athletes benefit from the new NIL rules. Athletes can create original content in their own words, giving subscribers insight into their lives on and off the court. What the players need is for you to subscribe, and plans start at just $20 a month, and that money goes to the University of Houston athletes. Subscribers will get one of a kind content straight from the players while helping the Houston Cougars compete on a national stage. Subscribe at HOUNIL.com. And as always, go Cougs. And when it comes to name, image, and likeness, it was Oregon. Oregon has all the kind of the bells and whistles when it comes to Phil Knight and what they're able to do with some new thing that they had launched today that Ryan Mansell actually had showed me before the game, and it's just interesting. It's crazy to think when you look at what other colleges are doing with name, image, and likeness. It's something that the University of Houston, obviously, they have to step up as well as they go into that Power Five aspect and be able to compete with those Power Five programs from that aspect. But going back to Let's Reach Cougs, transitioning over to this game against McNeese, it was the final non-conference game of the regular season. They've, like I said, that now they're 12-1
Let,
overall in the season.
let's stay with Tremont Mark. I want to add more on Tremont before we move on, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I was just thinking about how Coach Sampson mentioned in his post game presser that Tremont has, I think he said 3 more years left, and how he's just still scratching the surface as a basketball player and learning his role and learning how to be more than just a scorer. And I'm seeing him do that on a game to game basis, where we see him games where he scored the basketball well, along with the playmaking. But I think as Coug fans just keep watching, keep following this team, he's a very, very important piece because I would also the biggest play of his career so far was his offensive rebound against Rutgers in a tournament, and so
Yeah.
he's shown the ability to make those plays like that in big moments. Then the second big play was a half court shot he hit to beat Memphis, and so he's inept to making big plays in big moments. And as long as he keeps developing his all around game, he's going to be a really good player, special player, key player, X factor player for this team going down as the season continues.
No, absolutely. I think that's an interesting point you bring up because going back to his time with Houston, he has had those incredible moments. Even just coming, in situations in the clutch, like you mentioned, that Rutgers game, being able to find himself at the right time to be able to tip in that shot. When he doesn't hit that shot, maybe Rutgers upsets Houston. There is no Final Four run. Even going up against Memphis, I can't remember if had Houston. I think they might have already clinched the #1 seed for the conference tournament. But even then, that gives Memphis momentum going into the conference tournament. Who knows? That's just big things what he was able to do in his full healthy season. and now we're starting to beginning to see his transition, and just developing overall as a player. That's something that Kelvin Sampson said at the beginning of the season for Tremont Mark. This is barely really. It's obviously technically it's not his technically his junior season, but really it's just his third semester with the program being able to get that experience under the belt. You're continuing to see his development as that progresses. Now transitioning over to the non-conference portion overall for this team, like I mentioned, it I guess you could kind of see it. It's a bit tricky because you wanna think of it as the halfway point. It's technically not the halfway point. Set it up in that way in terms of non-conference because a week from today, Houston's final American Athletic Conference schedule will get underway on the road at Tulsa. But sticking to non-conference specifically, Houston 12-1. That's a record that you'll take 9 times out of 10. Really, you'll take 10 times out of 10 because the only loss came to a really good top 10 Alabama team. And you look at it, they played tough opponents in regards to Oregon on the road. Now, I know Oregon people might roll their eyes when it comes to tough opponent, but that is a tough environment having to go up there and play them up in Eugene, St. Mary's in the Fort Worth event in a neutral site. They're considered a quad one opponent. And they were really a tough team with its length that it was able to give Houston some problems. Again, we mentioned Alabama, the team that was able to beat the Cougars here at Fertitta Center. Virginia on the road, that's by far has been their most impressive win of the season. And then you had the tough test that they had against Kent State, which they had been playing well. And at that point, I'm not sure if they're still a quad one opponent, but they're still a very team that Houston came in here and they gave Houston everything they could have wanted and more. Outside of those games that I had listed, overall, Houston's looked dominant in the stretch. But I think, and it's something that Calvin touched on post game, it's when you look at the conference or the non-conference schedule that they've been able to put together. Is there one thing? What's kind of a biggest takeaway that you've had from the first 13 games of the season for the Cougars overall?
I think it was well put together. I mean, you have a couple. Well, you have a few games with high level talent, with tournament talent, with teams that can really challenge you and really can bring out the best in your team early, to which you can work on some of the weaknesses. And so, but also, I think it was a good balance of having teams that you can really dominate and work on getting certain young players playing time. And so, I think it was well put together. I think they are. I think it'll be well respected from the voters when it comes time to seeding, and things like that. I don't think it's as strong as others, but I think our schedule. I don't want to say it. It was decent, but it was good. It was a good schedule, and I think it challenged us. It's been able to see what we need to do as far as when we go into conference play and continue to work on. But I think the best game for us is those two road games, as far as in Oregon and Virginia. I think those are really, really, really games that can really help us. And also in Alabama at home, particularly because we lost it. And Coach Sampson talks about how you can learn from losses more than you can from your wins.
Yeah, that's something that he started saying, and I'm pretty sure it's like this, but I don't want to butcher it. But he says there's WNL's wisdom and lessons. That's what he calls it. So that's something that, again, from that Alabama loss, they were able to take away a lesson from it. In particular, when it comes to the ball movement aspect, something that after the Virginia game, he said that experience against Alabama, he's not sure if they would have been able to go in there to Charlottesville and really execute. That was the key phrase he used
Yeah.
after the win against the Cavaliers, being able to execute what they kind of planned heading into that game. He said that's something he's not sure had they not had the Alabama game before that, it wouldn't
Mhm.
have been something they would have been able to do. So again, that's like you mentioned, that's something from an experience standpoint that this schedule, especially early on, is something where something from a fan perspective, from home games, they were like, oh well, there's not really that many eye-popping games outside of the Alabama game, but I think overall, when you look at the schedule and something Kelvin said, he's the one that schedules the games for the Cougars, and he does so with specific purposes. And it's something that overall you've really kind of gotten to see it. Now, when you look at the net rankings, that's one of the things that Kelvin Sampson pointed out. There's a reason they've been top three in the net rankings all season long. They've been number one for a good chunk of it. UConn's kind of overtaken them with how strong of a season they've had. And I mean, UConn. UConn's a different animal, but that could be a team that Houston sees down the line. But they have been able to get a lot of those quality wins, especially like you mentioned on the road at Oregon, at Virginia. Those are tough environments to play in. And even the neutral site game against St. Mary's, that's kind of interesting when we heard the St. Mary's coach talk about that's an opponent that they got last minute because nobody wanted to play Houston on a neutral site field, which is interesting. It kind of goes to show the respect that the Cougars have overall across the nation. I'm looking at some of the and Amir Siddiq says it's good to see the improvement overall over all of the games, both individually and as a team. The Alabama game helped them learn how to finish games. Uh, Daniel Satterfield Knoxville said, "Good, just one loss. We learned a lot from, and still a position for one seed if we dominate conference." And I think that's something that has been brought up before in the past, just in terms of, yeah, obviously from where the goals and expectations are for a lot of not only people within the program, but just overall make a deep run in the NCAA tournament, a deep run that could see them finish just a stone's throw away at NRG Stadium when the Final Four comes in town in 2023. But that is something that a number one seed try to secure yourself into the best position possible to get to that Final Four goal come April in the city of Houston. But I think that's a good point. I think overall, from takeaways, something that Calvin Sampson alluded to in that presser that we played earlier, when it comes to this team, that I think it something that, and it might have not just been pointed out much more from seeing them play. They're a lot younger than maybe we might have envisioned at the beginning of the season, or maybe inexperienced is the right word, with a lot of players stepping into new roles. And specifically, I mean, look at the starting lineup. It's something that Kelvin said. Uh, he's reiterated a couple times throughout this season, but they lost four starters in last year's team that made that Elite Eight run. And last year's team was really a veteran-led team with a lot of, even though they hadn't had a lot of experience playing with Cougars per se, they've had a lot of experience playing college basketball. When you looked at the likes of Josh Carlton, Kyler Edwards, Tajay Moore, and obviously Fabian White, who had been with the Houston Cougars for 5 years, and he really knew what the expectations were when it comes to Cougar basketball. Now you look at this team now, Jamal Shed and Marcus Sasser, those two are really the anchors of this team. Tremont Mark, like we talked about it earlier, he's really had only 3 full semesters of being able to play healthy for the Cougars. And then you have Jawan Roberts. So even though he's a redshirt junior, this is really the first time he had rotational minutes a season ago, but it's the first time he's been asked to be a starter. Jarvis Walker, he's a true freshman. It's had to be an adjustment period for him as well, and something that Kelvin mentioned post game after the Virginia game. Just really, he's continued to gain more confidence. I think it's something that was interesting too. Kelvin said even in high school, Jarvis wasn't necessarily as comfortable known as being an alpha, like you mentioned that Emmanuel Sharp is, in the teams, even though Walker played for IMG, he was much more of a distributor, a passer, setting up his teammates. And that's something that Kelvin Sampson's pointed out during the week after the Virginian game. And then even look at the bench. Emmanuel Sharp, he's been the first guard off the bench the last 3 games. He's a freshman. He's a retro freshman. We talked about the extra 6 months he was able to get that got him experience, but this is his first time being able to play on the field because he is a freshman, on the court because he is a freshman. Terrence Arsenal, true freshman. Javier Francis, he was on the team a season ago, but again, his playing time was spotty, and this is really the full time where he's still getting a consistent rotation. So a lot of these guys, they have to learn by that experience, and that's something that, from a Cougar standpoint, by the time they get into the American Athletic Conference postseason tournament, they get into the NCAA tournament, hopefully they're in a position where they're much more comfortable with their roles. And come March Madness time, it could be a very dangerous team because they're only going to continue to get better because the more games they play, the more experience they're going to have under their belts.
The more experience, the more chemistry, the more the roles will be defined, and they'll know exactly what their roles are. As it's kind of still early, like you said, not quite to the half point part in the season, but the team is still evolving. I think the team will continue to trend upwards, especially with the schedule playing out the way it is. Some respect on this conference because they got some really good guards and some really good talent on a couple teams. But man, this team is just trending in the right direction. Keeps Coach Sampson still pulling the right strings, getting them to play the right way. But like he said, offensively, I mean, that's really the main thing. That's what really stood out to me. Not the way they moved the ball, the way no matter who it is on any given game, when you hot, the ball will find you, and Jamal will make sure the ball finds you. And so everything you said is right on point. This team is doing exactly what they need to do to get ultimately where they need to be when it comes to March and then the tournament. But I'm looking forward to stacking up wins and getting the best shot when it comes down to conference play, because it's always a couple games in conference over the last couple of years they've gave Houston fits and they drop a game or two.
And I mean, even looking at the first opponent, who they're going to play, they have to play at Tulsa, and that's been a place that's been hard for the Cougars to go in there and get wins the last few years. And Tulsa always has given them a really run for their money at Tulsa. Now, last season it was completely different circumstances. It was the first game that the Cougars had to play without Marcus Sasser, Jamon Mark, and Kyler Edwards missed that game with an ankle sprain as well. But it's been a place that Tulsa has played Houston well. And now when you look at overall across the American Athletic Conference standings, I think at the top, the two teams, obviously Houston #1 at 12-1. Memphis is right there with the Cougars at 10-3 from their non-conference slate. In Central Florida, they're 9-3. Cincinnati, the job they've been able to do, they're 9-4. East Carolina's 9-4. Tulane 7-4, and Wichita State at 6-5, and then South Florida's at 500 at 6-6. Tulsa, which will be Houston's first conference opponent a week from today, December 28th, they are 4-6. So I think I think the American Athletic Conference has fared much better. Certainly the top portions of it in our conference, it could make for some interesting challenges for the Cougars come January, February, and into March as they get into the postseason conference tournament that second week of March. But we'll start to wrap things up, and Dan, I'll get back to you after this break. But once again, this is Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian family. The Saxenian family is the primary sponsor for Let's Rage Coogs basketball for the remainder of the regular season and into the American Athletic Conference postseason tournament. And a shout out to our partners, beginning with HOUNIL. As the Cougars move to the Big 12, Houston will be competing with national players in basketball like Kansas, Baylor, Texas Tech, and more. Those schools have fans that have built huge name, image, and likeness groups to get their athletes NIL compensation. That gives them a huge advantage over the University of Houston, where NIL is still in its infancy, but you can help Cougar athletes by getting involved. Just go to HOUNIL.com to subscribe to player-created content like essays, videos, podcasts, and get access to private events with U of H players. Players are compensated for creating content, and fans get an inside look at their lives. Plans start at just $20 a month. That money helps the Cougars retain players to stay atop in basketball and help build momentum in football. HOUNIL.com. Subscribers get one-of-a-kind content straight from Cougar athletes. Subscribe today. HOUNIL.com. And as always, go Cougs. And of course, we can't forget about our partners, beginning with Hoop and Holler, the Houston Cougars micro collective, who's really been with us since the beginning of Let's Rage Cougs, going back to September 3rd when the Cougars opened the season against UTSA. Hoop and Holler, the Houston Cougars micro collective behind the Star Pizza commercials. Star Pizza is another one of our sponsors for today's episode of Let's Rage Cougs. Star Pizza, with various locations across the Houston area. Star Pizza is Houston's best pizza since 1976, and be sure to check them out online at starpizza.net. Dayon, I'll toss it over to you. Any final takeaways from this McNeese game, and or anything that you're kind of looking ahead towards the American Athletic Conference schedule?
JVA continues to shine. I think this night is huge for Emmanuel in his new role and the role that he had earlier when he had a couple big, he had big games as far as making shots. That was a difference. Now it's a difference because it's a different role, a more important role as far as being that first man off the bench. And this is his first big game in that role. I think it's bold. It's going to bode well for his confidence going forward. I think he's going to continue to look for shots, hunt his shots, and continue to make shots. And so I'm excited for the young players continue to develop the team. The chemistry is getting better. I can tell they're getting more familiar with one another. And so I'm loving what I'm seeing from this team. I can't wait to go through a challenging conference play. I see the comment right here, and it's definitely right. conference is definitely going to be challenging with the likes of Temple. They have some good guards, of course, Memphis, Tulane, Cincinnati. And so I can't wait, man. I love this team. You can't end any episode without saying go Cougs, though. You can catch me on any social media platform as it's listed on the screen, Dayon Dunlap.
For sure. Once again, the final score: the Houston Cougars are victorious over McNeese, 83-44. Javier Francis led all scorers with 23 points for the Cougars. He also added in 13 rebounds, his third career double-double. 23 points were a career high. Emmanuel Sharp also had a career high with 18 points, 6 of 10 shooting. All 10 of those shots were from 3 points, so that was his field goal percentage and 3-point field goal percentage were the same, 6 of 10 for 60% from the field. He also had 3 rebounds for the Cougars, and Marcus Sasser, third in scoring, 17 points, 6 of 12 shooting from the field, 5 of 10 on his 3-pointers. Like I said earlier in the show, we will be back Friday following the conclusion of the Houston Cougars football team against the Louisiana Raging Cajuns in the Independence Bowl up in Shreveport. Until then, everybody stay warm because it is supposed to get really, really cold in the next 24 hours when it comes to Houston. I think that cold front, is it going to hit you guys as well? Is it going to
Yeah,
miss
it's
you guys?
definitely going to hit me. Yeah, tomorrow it's supposed to be -6 here where I am in
Jeez.
Missouri. Yeah, so it's going to be crazy.
Yeah, so stay warm. Take care. And we'll see you guys on Friday. And if you guys don't tune in on Friday, happy holidays as well. But make sure you tune in because it'll be the final time for the 2022 season when Let's Rage Coogs will be live after a Houston Cougars football game until 2023. Until next time, once again, Houston Cougars men's basketball victorious 83-44 over McNeese. And as always, thank you guys for the support. Even those of you guys that come and stop by at the Fertitta Center, it's greatly appreciated because if it wasn't for you viewers, there would be no Let's Rage Coogs. So thank you as always. And Dan, take it away. One final.
Go Cougs, baby.